kept you waiting, huh?
Hello, welcome to Rookies and Codecs, the Metal Gear podcast. I'm Alex.
I'm Isaac.
So, I've had an idea for a podcast for the past couple months, and I've been kind of narrowing down what I wanted to do. And, I wanted to do Myst or the Quake series, but I thought that, the Metal Gear series might be something that would be able to catch on. And it's not a series that I've played many of the games at all, which I thought would give a unique, I guess, perspective. What's your history with the games, Isaac?
Well, I started actually playing the games back with Metal Gear Solid 5. Um, have little instances. I've got a friend that was obsessed with the series growing up. So I've heard about it, played a couple little bits of some of the games here and there. Um, but when Ground Zeroes came to PlayStation Plus, I jumped in and got absolutely obsessed with it. Got Phantom Pain whenever it came out. Um, Played an immense amount of that game, and then with the Master Collection that came out here recently, I've gone back and I've played Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3. So not played all the games, but I've got a pretty good foothold on the series.
Yeah, certainly much more than me. I've played a couple of hours of Metal Gear Solid, and then maybe about 5 or 6 hours of the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake that came out earlier this year. Um, but I've heard of the series. Obviously, I had a coworker at one of my first jobs that was very much into it, and I remember very distinctly him coming into work one day being upset, and I was like, "Hey, what's wrong?" And he's like, "They replaced Snake," and I was like, what do you mean?" And he started going into a diatribe about how Kiefer Sutherland was voicing Snake and not David Hayter. So I remember that very distinctly.
Yeah, I remember that being a big issue. I was in high school at the time, and I remember my friend that I mentioned earlier being so upset about David Hayter getting replaced, and it was a big deal at the time, and it's still kind of one that keeps me scratching my head a little bit.
Yeah, did Kojima ever say like what the decision was behind that?
I mean, once you play Metal Gear Solid 5, it does kind of make sense in the context of the Phantom Pain, but um, a lot of people just chalked it up to him, being in love with Hollywood and kind of wanting to make connections with famous actors and work with them more. Is what a lot of people have kind of chalked it up to.
Yeah, that might not be too far off because like once he started his own studio, he worked with a lot of famous actors and directors with like Death Stranding, and then there's this horror game that has like Sophia Lillis and Udo Kier, um, but like Death Stranding had a pretty stacked cast.
Oh, yeah, and even with PT, I had Guillermo del Toro, Norman Reedus, which eventually that did get fizzled out, and they were brought in with Death Stranding. But um, and he's always been very open about his love of cinema, and I mean his earlier games like I know Police Knots is heavily inspired by Blade Runner, and then Metal Gear Solid with Escape to New York, Escape from L.A. Those games have he wears his inspiration on his sleeve.
I'm not familiar with Police Knots. Have you played any of his other games outside of Metal Gear?
No, I've not played his older ones. I've played the first Death Stranding. I've not gotten very far into it, but I've played probably the first 3 or 4 hours of it a good couple times.
Yeah, I'm in about the same boat. That's a game I kind of come back to every once in a while. It's not one that I've gotten super into. Um, I mean, it's good, and I mean, visually, it's probably the best game from the PS4 era. But it's definitely a weird one as far as its structure.
Now, did you ever play PT?
No, I'm totally missed out on that because I've been a Xbox guy for almost 20 years, so I didn't have a PS4. Um, and I imagine that finding one with PT installed on it is nearly impossible now.
Yeah, I did play it back whenever it was on the PSN, and it was a trip and a half. I actually didn't realize that Hideo Kojima was involved in it until a lot later. Um, because I was still a kid, I wasn't really paying as close attention. Um, but it was. I remember. I mean, it made me afraid to go to bed at night.
Yeah, because I was gonna be Silent Hills, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, they were going to do Silent Hills. It was going to be co-created between Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro,
Oh
with
wow.
Norman Reedus starring.
Yeah, it's no wonder that people are still like wanting that game because I'm sure there would have been really something, and then uh, they Konami and Kojima had their very public fallout. Um, but I mean, speaking of Konami, I think Silent Hill is probably in my top three like favorite video game franchises. I really like. Definitely played more Silent Hill than I have the Metal Gear games.
Yeah, I don't know that I've played many Konami games at all outside of Metal Gear Solid, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think Metal Gear, Silent Hill, and Castlevania are probably their three like flagship properties.
Yeah, I've played a little bit of some of the older Castlevania games, but yeah, that's about the extent of my experience with them.
Um, so it's like so for the show for people that are listening, the show is going to be kind of broken up into three seasons. The first season is going to be the canon games. So our goal is to try to do a monthly podcast, and we'll see how that works out. Because life happens. But we're going to start with Metal Gear, Metal Gear 2, Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, Metal Gear Solid 4, Metal Gear Peace Walker, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, and Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. So that's ten games. Um, and I've started playing the first Metal Gear, and I've been playing it on Twitch. You can follow the show on Twitch, and we also have a Discord group, which I'll post the links to all that in the description, whether you're listening to this on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever. Um, and then the second season is going to be non-canon games and spin-offs. So it'll start with Snake's Revenge, Ghost Babel. We'll do some of the VR missions, Acid, Portable Ops, Acid 2, and Metal Gear Survives, um, which that's another game that I've heard is super controversial as far as the canon. And I think that's the game they made right after Kojima left, right?
Yeah, it was the one that everybody got really upset with because they charged. I can't remember if it was like $5 or $10 for additional save files after your first save file.
They charge
Like
for
they
save
were,
files.
yeah, they were milking that cash cow for all they could.
Wow. Yeah, I forgot that Konami went through like a huge dark period, and it's only been this last year or two where they've actually like kind of put out some good stuff between Silent Hill 2 remake, Silent Hill F, and Metal Gear Solid 3. Um, that's did they ever patch that out, or is that still a thing?
I think they eventually kind of rescinded that, but I'll be honest. Once it got into all that, and I found out Kojima wasn't involved, I just kind of tuned that out.
Yeah, huh? Wow. So it'll be interesting once we reach that one. And then the third and final season will be remakes and guest appearances. Um, so some of these games, I don't intend for us to necessarily beat to completion, but just to basically talk about them and acknowledge their existence. But Twin Snakes, which I believe is the GameCube remake of Metal Gear Solid, and then of course the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake that came out earlier this year. As far as guest appearances, um, we have new international track and field, Evolution Skateboarding, Super Bomberman R, a bunch of the Little Planet games, Ape Escape 3, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Fortnite. Um, which I wasn't aware. You brought this to my attention that Snake was in Fortnite, and I had no freaking clue. But I don't know why I was surprised. Um,
Yeah, I think there's a Solid Snake skin and a Raiden skin that they put in there.
okay, yeah. With the guest appearances, a lot of it is DLC, so it's like we might split those games up into just like 2 episodes, just to like talk about them. I have a few of them, so I'm going to play a couple of them, but I'm not. It's not going to be like the other ones where we play them all and talk about the whole story and everything. I mean, I don't know how great the story is for a new international track and field for the DS is.
You can't miss out on that.
All right.
It's a life changing experience.
Well, probably the best $7 I spent for a DS game. Yeah, so I think that's going to be kind of what the show is, and basically how episodes will work is that each episode will do a story breakdown. We'll do talk about graphics and music, the development, and anything else that seems relevant. So yeah, I think I've been wanting to do a podcast for a while. I'm a delivery driver, so I get a chance to listen to quite a few. The Geekdom Network is probably my favorite podcast network. They've got Ultima Final Fantasy, Nude Clan, the Dragon Quest Puff Puff Hour, and many more. They've since retired, but they're in my eyes kind of the granddaddy of video game podcasts. Um, so I know you've said you've done. Have you done a couple of podcasts before?
Yeah, I've done just a couple of like standalone episodes. There's only one that you can actually find on the internet now, but those are ones I've hosted. I've edited podcasts for a website, and I've got experience in you know dipping my toes into every little part of making a podcast, but I don't know that I've done one stem to stern and stuck with it ever before. So this will be a fun experience for me as well.
Yeah, I co-host a podcast. It's called Roy's Rants, and my buddy Roy hosts it, and I joined as co-host maybe 2 years ago or so. Uh, it just kind of I was a guest for one episode, and then I just kind of ended up sticking around, and we still record episodes to this day, and that's basically a movie, comic book, and pop culture podcasts all rolled into one. So the nice thing about this one is there's an end goal, whereas like Roy's rant, it's like, I mean, as much as I love doing it, um, it doesn't have like a singular goal to it, which I mean means that it could pretty much go on forever.
I like doing it in this format a lot, um, because, like you said, there is a definite end goal, and I feel like it's going to give us a bit more to talk about in each episode than if we were doing like an open ended, this could go on forever type thing.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's like I kind of treated the. It's funny, we've not met each other in real life. I kind of put out an ad like you would for a job for finding a co-host, and I interviewed a couple people, but you were by far the most communicative out of everybody else that I talked to.
I appreciate you choosing me.
Yeah,
This is one of my favorite series. I mean, definitely top five. So whenever I saw that, I rarely ever would just reach out to somebody I've never met over the internet like that. But so far, it seems like it's working out. So I can't wait to see where it goes.
yeah, and who knows if the show does well enough. Um, I definitely be interested in doing more. Like I said, it might be cool to do something like Devil May Cry or heck, even Castlevania. It's like I've never played those games either. Like I've played more Metal Gear than I have Castlevania for sure. Um, but
If you are interested in Devil May Cry at all, that is another one that's in my top five.
yeah, yeah, I have all the games, and Resident Evil is another favorite of mine. Of course, um, I know there's a slight link from the first Devil May Cry to Resident Evil 4 because that's what Resident Evil 4 was originally going to be, and they ended up making a separate game. So that's kind of how I discovered it. Um,
Right.
there's only like 6 games in that series right now. Is that correct?
If you count the remake.
Yeah. Um, which that was another one that I heard mixed things about as far as like drama with the fandom, as far as being too different.
Yeah, it's one that they kind of took everything that people liked about Devil May Cry and literally threw it back in their face and said, "We're gonna go this way now."
Have you played it?
I've not beaten it, but I have dabbled in it a little bit. I think it's fun enough as its own kind of standalone thing, but when you put it up against the other Devil May Cry games, you can tell that there's definitely something missing there.
Interesting. Um, yeah. So I mean that's no promises just yet, but that's another like possibility for a show, and that one would be um, easier to do as far as like game time and the amount of games versus Metal Gear, which I was surprised how many games there actually is in the series. I mean, there's between the main series, the spin-offs, and the remakes. There's about 10 of them.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Whenever I started playing the Metal Gear Solid games, I thought it was just one, two, three, four, five, and even until I'd say probably about 3 or 4 months ago, I didn't realize that Peace Walker was actually followed along the mainline story. I thought it was just a spinoff like Acid or Portable Ops was, and even Portable Ops. Some people still want to say that it's canon, even though it's kind of been proven otherwise. Um, but there are still people. there's still people arguing how many of these games are canon.
Right. So I guess the only one person I would assume would know for sure would be the creator Kojima. Um, so I guess that brings up an interesting question I want to pose real quick is so obviously Kojima is not with Konami anymore. What is your opinion on them doing more Metal Gear games without him that like aren't remakes?
Uh, to me personally, um, I think outside of them maybe bringing him back to finish the story of Phantom Pain, I really don't know what else they could do because um, now I don't know how much you know about the timeline of the series. But you know it kind of goes
I know some of the
into the
games like
past, into the
I know
future.
like I know like Metal Gear Solid 3 is technically the first game like chronologically. We're gonna be playing them in release order just to see um, the progression of it. You know, it's kind of the same way I like to watch the Star Wars movies. Is I usually watch them in release order.
Right. Okay, so yeah, the if you want to go by the timeline, if you're following Solid Snake's story, it goes Metal Gear, Metal Gear 2, then Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 4. And then the story that goes back into the past is Metal Gear Solid 3, Peace Walker, Ground Zeroes, and Phantom Pain. So Phantom Pain ends right, I mean, leads pretty much straight into the original Metal Gear. So it's kind of a full circle moment. But the story of the game was never completed because Kojima went so over budget. Konami pretty much told him, "This is what you get. You can't do anymore." And the last, I want to say the last chap, 2 or 3 chapters maybe, is just storyboards that
Oh
you
wow!
get to view after you finish the story
Have you heard of the
of the
game?
game.
Have you heard of the game Xenogears?
I've heard of it. I've not don't have any experience in it.
Um, so it's a Square Enix game, and it was originally a
Mhm.
pitch for Final Fantasy VII, and they also ran over budget, and like most JRPGs that were on the PS1, it was 2 discs, and they had this epic story that they wanted to tell over 7 games, and obviously they didn't get to do that. So the first disc is it's a normal JRPG game like you would expect. But the second disc, you get like this slideshow of the main character in like a chair telling the rest of the story, and then you get a handful of what the story was going to be and gameplay and boss fights. But it's this really strange and abstract way that they decided to tell the story because they ran out of budget and out of time, and they were left with two choices: either tell the second half of the story really cheaply or end the story on disc one, which would have been really dissatisfying. So it kind of sounds like a similar situation happened with Metal Gear Solid 5.
Yeah, that's actually a lot of the reason that the whole drama with Konami ousting Kojima ended up happening. He had a habit of going over budget with his games. I think I saw a figure somewhere that said Metal Gear Solid 5 ended up costing like $120 million to make. And that's with them cutting him off before he finished. It's actually a lot of the reason that they released Ground Zeroes in the way that they did, because it was kind of it's like a 1 2 hour experience that leads into the story of Phantom Pain. Konami wanted to release that as kind of like to see how well a Metal Gear Solid game would do, um, in that time after four, finished out. Solid Snake story to see if it would be worth the financial risk, um, which made a lot of the fans mad. But I mean, Metal Gear Solid sales regardless. There's a lot of interesting kind of behind the scenes drama that we can get into as we go through the series
Yeah, for
that'll
sure.
paint a little bit of a better picture of it.
Yeah, I think five will probably be the most in depth uh, that we'll get because that's when Kojima left. I think. I mean, I don't have much of a dog in the fight because I don't. I'm not a fan of the series because I can't count myself as a fan because I've barely played the games. So this is going to be an interesting experiment. But to me, Kojima's not immortal. Even if he had stayed with the company, he would have to retire eventually. So, in my eyes, if they're wanting to keep making games, I think making spin-offs or games about other characters seems like the best way to go. And I feel like I suspect that they're going to keep doing remakes. I think that's probably the safest bet. But I feel like if they do something that is a completely new story and experience, I imagine it'll be either about new characters or about one of the side characters. Um, you know,
And even with the canon games, it wouldn't be the first one not to be helmed by Kojima. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance was made by Platinum Games, but they still consulted Hideo Kojima for the story. So it would be interesting to see what they could do. Um, but it it's it would be difficult to follow the story with the same tone and tenacity that Kojima had without him being present, I feel.
right? Yeah, and I think you'd have to get somebody that was present through a lot of the other games. I'm trying to think of an example that of somebody else that is, I guess, to use Final Fantasy as a example again, it's like when they were making Final Fantasy 12, the director who worked on Vagrant Story and Final Fantasy Tactics left about halfway through production, so they got the guy who co-directed the other Evil East games, to finish Final Fantasy 12. So I don't know if there's any co-directors that have worked on a lot of the other Metal Gear games with Kojima that sort of, for I guess lack of better words, could kind of mimic the style somewhat.
Yeah. And you know, um, I honestly feel like the closest that I've found to keeping the same tone as Kojima, as silly as this is going to sound, is Tetsuya Nomura with the Kingdom Hearts series. I know that makes probably no sense to you at all right now, but as you get into playing the Metal Gear Solid games, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Kingdom Hearts much
I've
at all.
I've played a little bit of
Um,
them, but I it's a couple of games that I have, but I haven't finished them yet.
they're very good, very character driven stories, and it's a phenomenal story that you know is all about friendship and about the struggles that someone is willing to go through to uh, save their friends. Um, and it, I feel like it is very similar in tone to the Metal Gear Solid games because they can be very serious games one moment and have just an off the wall gag the next and still keep you following the story and invested in the characters, and still allow for those sillier moments.
Yeah, I imagine that the Kingdom Hearts games probably have a lot less cleavage. I would hope, because it's a kids game with Disney characters.
Slightly less, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's like the Metal Gear games are so legendary that I'm familiar with some of um, the female characters, which should be interesting to get into how those. I don't know. It's like I'm not necessarily a prude, but there are times when I'm playing the game and I'm like, is this really necessary?
It's very 90s. I don't, and even like there was a sequence in Metal Gear Solid 5, and I was playing it at I think 14 years old. I was like, I really hope my mom doesn't come into my room right now because she is going to yank me off this TV.
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause I know that Metal Gear Solid series are definitely inspired by the Sean Connery and Roger Moore era of James Bond uh, movies, which had characters named Pussy Galore for God's sake, and um, so I know there's an interesting dynamic between the games being super serious and really accurate as far as the guns and the military lingo goes, but then you'll have somebody that can shoot bees.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one thing that'll be really interesting to see your viewpoint on as we go through, um, Hideo Kojima growing up, his parents were alive during the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So he grew up hearing about that and seeing the after effects of it. And that is kind of one of the driving factors in these stories, because the Metal Gears, they are walking basically atomic missile silos. Um, they're nuclear weapons that are designed to be able to go anywhere in the world. So it'd be interesting to kind of see what your take on some of this stuff is as we go through the series, keeping that in mind.
Yeah, I'd say my immediate take is weapons of mass destruction are bad. Um, but yeah, I get what you mean though, because I remember I think it is the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 3 where one of the metal where there's some sort of giant missile that goes off and ends up like taking out half the forest, and Snake
Yeah.
barely survives. Um, so I mean, we'll be getting to that game before you know it. Uh, but I know that one and Metal Gear Solid are kind of hotly debated on is which one is the best game in the series, and that's something I wanted to ask you is which do you have a personal favorite right now?
Um, Knee jerk reaction, I would say the Phantom Pain, purely on the merits of its gameplay. And of course, it's the first one that I played in the series, and so it's always going to have a special place in my heart. But as far as the actual story goes, I feel like uh, my favorite one would be the original Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, I mean that one's a classic. I think I may have played a little bit of it when I was a kid because they we used to get these demo discs in the mail, and I believe Metal Gear Solid was one of the demos where you could play through like the first uh, maybe 30 to 40 minutes, and uh, yeah, it's I played a crap ton of games that way through just playing the demos, and I think Metal Gear Solid was one of them.
Don't get those anymore. I know they did one for Metal Gear Solid 2, but a demo disc. I believe it was with Zone of the Enders. Um, but yeah, that's one thing that I miss a lot about older games was having demos.
Yeah, so they don't really do that anymore. Unfortunately, I think the most recent example I can think of where a game came with an actual demo was Final Fantasy Type Zero came with a demo for Final Fantasy 15. But I mean, I guess companies are like, well, we can just put the demo on the marketplace or whatever, and people could find it there. Um, so
I know. I think the last one I played was Final Fantasy 15, the platinum demo. And I know this is getting a little off topic, but I saw a study that said, it a lot of the reason that stopped was because if people, got to play the game, they got kind of satiated with the demo and that would lead to less sales. But if, that's sitting there on their screen, can't play it, can't touch it, then they're more likely to pull the trigger on it whenever it does go on sale if they're on the fence or something. So it's kind of interesting psychology behind why they ended up going away.
yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know. It's like I feel like for me, it's like if I'm going to play the demo, usually it's for a game that I'm going to be playing anyway. And it's kind of like, well, the game's coming out in a month or two. I at least like want to get a taste of it. Alone in the
Yeah, like
Dark,
how does it play? How's it going to go?
the Alone in the Dark remake did something really interesting where the demo isn't part of the actual main game. It's kind of a prequel, uh, but you get an idea of like the mechanics and what the game is going to feel like. But it's its own story, which I thought was a really unique idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess getting back to Metal Gear, you talked a little bit
Yeah, I'm
about
sorry, got us off there.
that's all right. That's what the best podcasts do. Um, but once we start getting into past the first game, we'll do rankings for the games as well because I think that sort of thing is fun. So it's like we'll do a ranking at the end of each episode. So we'll have a definitive list at the end of the podcast for which games are the best and which ones, like, I mean, if they're near the bottom, maybe those are the ones that can be skipped. So I'll be curious to see like how like the canon games, how the like spin-offs match up against the canon games, um, as far as quality goes.
Yeah. Now, um, it'll be really interesting to see, like, specifically like Peace Walker for me because I've heard that the story is not as important as the other ones. I don't know for certain. I've not played it, but I've also heard that it introduces some gameplay mechanics that are some of my favorite ones from Metal Gear Solid 5. Um, so it'll be really interesting to see kind of as we go through, even how my perspective on some of these games may change.
Yeah, for sure. Um, but I think that's pretty good. I think we did a pretty good job of outlining what the show is going to be and our experience. Did you have anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Um, I think you've about covered all of it.
Like I said, you can find the show. It has a YouTube channel, um, and a Twitch channel, and then also a Discord. I think we're up to about 10 people now. So feel free to hop in and talk about the games, share fan art or anything like that. Obviously, try to avoid. I'm gonna try to avoid spoilers for the games because we're gonna be playing them in order. There is a spoiler section, but I've got that muted for me. Um, so you can check out the show. Our plan is to release an episode a month. So hopefully our next episode will be near the end of January. According to How Long to Beat, Metal Gear is only like a 4 to 5 hour game, and I'm about an hour and a half into it. So I might be able to beat it within the next two sittings or so. I will warn you, the game is old. It's got some jank to it, but that's
Yeah,
it's
I've been told it's best played with a guide in hand.
yeah. I haven't gotten like lost or anything, but that I've definitely died a couple of times. That's for sure. And um, but I'll talk more about both the things I like about it and the things that are a little janky, but at the same time, it's like it's a game from '87, so it's like you kind of have to forgive a little bit of it too, because it's just the way the game is programmed.
Yeah.
But thanks for checking out the show. I'm hoping that the listeners really like it. Um, Take care.
All right. Thank you.